Welcome to WILPF San Jose's regular third Friday meeting. We open our meetings with the Raging Grannies. So this is how it's going to go. The Raging Grannies. And then I'm going to ask Rowan to introduce our speakers. And then we'll have a time, I imagine, for some Q&A as they are, after they're done. They can tell us how they'd like to handle the Q&A. And then, at the end of the meeting, we'll have some announcements. So if you've got something to announce, make a note. And at the end, you can do announcements. And then we close with the Raging Granny songs. So here's how it goes.
They're intent on killing freedoms, and it's more than Roe v. Wade. They want state control of women, and they want us all afraid. They assault female autonomy, and it's more than forcing birth. 'Cause they see us as their property, and our lives do not have worth. When they talk about the right to life, they mean fetuses unborn. After birth, some babies have no rights, and the mother's life is scorned. If they cared about life's sanctity, they'd end massacres in schools, in the homelessness and poverty, but instead they're just plain cruel. We must start a revolution to reclaim our civil rights. We will stop this persecution, and it's gonna be a fight. We will not live in the Handmaid's Tale. We refuse to be abused. We will not be terrorized by males. We'll be free to live and choose. Oh, say what a day when Roe went away. Women lost basic rights to control their own bodies. We are no longer safe without Roe versus Wade. Since the rights we had gained were so quickly overturned, we are not going back there to the times of despair. Revolution will start, since Supremes have no heart. No hangers, no back alleys, no mothers, children starving. No man's policy or creed will make us again slaves. The people of GRR, Grandmothers for Reproductive Rights, bang. I love the fact that the exclamation point persists on the GRR, bang. I was invited about a year ago, maybe a little over, to a GRR meeting in San Francisco, which I was not able to attend. But I said, oh, I really want to stay on your mailing list. And so when we were casting about for somebody to talk to us, that seemed like a group that would be really aligned with our WILF and Raging Granny population. And so we've asked them to come. Cait is executive director, and she's going to be our main speaker. And I'm terrible at introductions, which is why Paula usually does them. And so I'm going to let Cait introduce herself. I'm really sorry.
No, that's just fine. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm here tonight with our board chair, Dr. Connie Adler. And so she is also going to just be here to answer questions, to talk about our work. Thank you for those songs. My father was a Marine, and I grew up going to Marine Corps League gatherings all the time. So it's really nice to hear the Marine Corps song about abortion. That was great. Thank you for that. My dad would hate it. So we're Grandmothers for Reproductive Rights. I'm Cait Vaughan. I'm the interim executive director. We're actually hiring for a new executive director right now. We just looked at some candidates today. We're really excited. But I've been holding this role while we're in that process. My normal role is that I'm the national grassroots organizer. And I have been with GRR since late 2020. But I met them when I worked at an independent abortion care provider back in the beginning of the very, very beginning of the Trump presidency, and fell in love with the work they do. And when they said, we want to go national and grow, I really wanted that role. So I've been lucky to be with them ever since. And I'm going to let Connie say some words about herself as well, because she's she's our leader on our board and just like an incredible part of this organization. So
hi, I'm Connie Adler. I'm a physician. I practiced here in Maine for 34 years, doing women's health and in other places before that. But anyway, so I've done women's health for forever, and also then done involvement with women's health since the 70s, first as a midwife and then now as a physician. I've been with GRR. Well, I've been on the advisory board for GRR for quite a while, many years, but then been the board chair for 2 years. And it has been enormously fun to watch GRR grow, to connect with people all over the country, to watch GRR become a real presence at the State House, where during the legislative session, we really pull way beyond our weight in terms of being able to talk to legislators and influence legislation, which is very exciting work. We have the two major programs which Cait is going to describe to you, but also do all kinds of other involvement all over the country. One of our board members has been very heavily involved in the Arkansas. I don't know if you've been reading up about that one. In Arkansas, they are trying to get abortion rights on the ballot this November, and just collected 100,000 signatures to make that happen. We have folks in California, and Cait will probably talk about that some more. But anyhow, we're everywhere, and we work intergenerationally to make sure that everybody knows about these issues, and that we together can work on abortion care for sure and abortion rights, but on reproductive rights writ large. So I know in California now you have all of this turmoil at the moment about trans rights. Well, and we do everywhere else as well, but all of those, the reproductive rights for everybody, we want to make sure that our children, grandchildren, people we love, whether they're related or not, have the full extent of their reproductive rights.
yeah, thanks, Connie. So I'll start with just a little history about GRR before I talk more in depth about our programs. But so GRR was started in Maine in 2013. So it's actually has had, a long-ish life so far. I know for y'all who started in 1915, that's not so long, but it started with our founder, Judy Carl, and a really wonderful group of friends of hers who were her peers, getting together and talking about what was happening with trap laws and lots of other restrictions across the country, and feeling frightened about, and seeing the writing on the wall about the moment we're in right now. And they felt strongly by coming together and talking about their experiences as younger women and the experiences of their friends. Many of them had had their own abortions, illegal or legal. People had lost friends who left college to have an abortion and never returned. Lots of the experiences that we all are familiar with. And they felt that it was still important for young people and people younger than themselves to hear those stories, to really remember what the lack of a federal right to abortion, the sort of havoc that it wrought on women's lives. And they felt that there was a place in this movement for older women, a really important place. And so they started showing up to the State House and, you know, sharing information, going to fairs and things and handing out information. It really started as a small Maine-based group. And then we started getting people from other parts of the country who were really excited about this, and wanted it to grow. And so that's why I came on in 2020, and we have been doing an enormous amount of outreach to grow this work. And so a lot of our folks who, you know, are activists with GRR are also activists with other groups, right? The idea is not to replace anything that people are already doing, but in the reproductive rights, health and justice movements, we've gotten feedback from folks that sometimes it can feel like that's not a great place for older women, or it's not really built with them in mind. And so we hope to be a political home for older women in the country who really feel that reproductive rights are something they're passionate about, and who want to work with younger people. And so as we've grown, we've really evolved from an organization that I would say, when I first encountered them in 2017, were more, you know, would say things like we're pro-choice, and they would really focus on birth control. And we've really, I would say, kind of moved our own needle over the years to say we are now very proudly a pro-abortion organization. We're working very intergenerationally, and we've grown our work and really deepened our sort of practice. And so our goal is to work intergenerationally, to apply a reproductive justice lens to the work of reproductive rights. And we want to work with young people hand in hand to win reproductive rights, health, and justice for the present and future generations. That's the, you know, what we're after. And part of what we're doing, we try to do, is really leverage the status of grandmothers and older women as sources of truth, safety, hubs in their community, networkers, history keepers, all of those things, and really leverage that in our relationships, organizing with younger people to make sure that everyone can access accurate information and care around their sexual and reproductive health and decision-making without shame, without undue barriers, and certainly with safety and affordability. And I will say, even though grandmothers is in our name, it's really important to know a lot of people are not grandmothers in the strict sense. We think of, we're here for anyone. And of course, men are also invited to GRR, but you know, it tends to be us. But we think about grandmothering a better future that is more just. And we welcome anyone to join us who wants to do that. And so I'm going to share just a couple slides that share some information about who we are. So give me one moment. Well, that's all. So I just wanted to show, go back to the beginning, Cait. Okay. So yeah, we're envisioning a world where everybody has access to all the sexual and reproductive health care they need, including abortion. We all want everyone to be able to exercise their human rights, to have bodily autonomy, to have children, to not have children, to raise their families in safe and sustainable communities. And of course, those principles come to us from the reproductive justice movement, which was founded by Black women in the 90s, right? And so we're very grateful to do our reproductive rights work to the best of our ability through this framework. And we have, like Connie mentioned, we do a lot of policy work. We're a part of national coalitions and local coalitions that work on policy. We've been a part of coalitions working on the Women's Health Protection Act and the EACH Act, and now the Abortion Justice Act, which is a new version put forward by Representative Ayanna Pressley. So we do care about policy change. And we feel really strongly that we need to do popular grassroots education to change culture as a way of creating the conditions in which we can pass the kinds of policies we truly need. And so the two main sort of pathways that we work with, one is called our ROW campaign, and that stands for Reproductive Options Exist. And this is a campaign to expose the deception and the harms of anti-abortion centers. People may know them as crisis pregnancy centers. Are people familiar with them? I'm going to stop sharing so I can see you nodding. Folks are kind of familiar with what those are. I see some shaking
Our
out.
Peninsula region grannies are specifically targeting fake abortion clinics and go and do things up there. We haven't done any, but we have been invited to join our sisters on the peninsula to do that work. So I know that
Awesome.
maybe not everybody knows about that, but it is a local issue for sure.
Yeah, so anti-abortion centers are often called crisis pregnancy centers. We feel anti-abortion center is a more accurate term because they are usually nonprofits. Sometimes they are medical clinics, but usually they are nonprofits, usually religiously affiliated. And their agenda is to divert people who are looking for information to make a pregnancy decision, or looking for information to seek an abortion, and divert them away from that care. They use deceptive tactics and advertising and emotional manipulation, and the offer of free services like a free pregnancy test, a free ultrasound, free baby clothes, things like that, to lure people in. They tend to target younger people who are more vulnerable, people in low-income communities, and certainly communities of color, right? And so these places, their one agenda is to end abortion. They often look like little mom and pop innocent kind of organizations, but they are backed by enormous amounts of money from really powerful national and international far-right organizations. And we decided to focus on anti-abortion centers because they are in every state in the country. There's one near almost every community in the country, unfortunately. Before Dobbs, they outnumbered actual abortion clinics 3 to 1. And now the latest figures I've been hearing from people in the world who research anti-abortion centers is that it's more like 5 to 1 now, because so many clinics have had to close post-Dobbs. So these our campaign focuses on educating people in their communities about the existence of these centers, partnering with local providers of actual family planning and abortion care services to make sure people know where they can go for sexual and reproductive health care, where someone doesn't have an agenda about the outcome. Where can they get funding for abortion? Where could they go to sign up for Medicaid if they do indeed want to continue their pregnancy and they're eligible for that? Where could they find abortion funding? But also we lead teach-ins in college classrooms, community groups, and anywhere we're invited, really, to help people learn what these places are, the harms they cause, where are they in those particular communities, and what sort of actions they can take to make sure that vulnerable pregnant people in where they live are not being roped into these places. So this campaign also gets really creative. What you're seeing here is a picture of one person who's a part of a group we call the Pop-Up Buddies. They have been doing weekly demonstrations outside of an anti-abortion center in Waterville, Maine for a little over 2 years now. Every week they stand there, they share information, they draw attention to it. And that group started as 2 people just kind of standing out there and has grown to a really strong group of about a dozen people who do this every week, and then also have become really amazing advocates at the State House and really grown into their leadership from this very kind of homespun beginning. I want to tell you all that I looked up who are the anti-abortion centers in your area. And I just wanted to say that you have, in San Jose, there are 4, just in San Jose, 4 anti-abortion centers that I could find. Birthright San Jose, the GAS Women's Center, and something called Real Options, which is an O'Brien medical clinic. And I'm going to put these in the chat here for you in case you want to check them out. O'Brien operates 2 clinics. One's in East San Jose, one's in San Jose. So right there in a progressive state in terms of abortion, like California, these places are everywhere. There are hundreds of them in California. And so, yeah, I wanted you to know that those are there. We find that this is an incredible pathway because they exist in every community. It's really low barrier to take action against them, and you can be creative about it. And we really feel that in this post-Dobbs moment we're living in, the kinds of confusion, particularly that younger people are experiencing about what are their rights, where can they go for help, that there's already confusion since Roe fell, where some people think, oh, I can't get an abortion, even in a state where they can. And these places prey on that confusion. They also spread awful disinformation and junk science about abortion. They promote things like abortion pill reversal, which is has been called out by every major legitimate medical association, ACOG, and gosh, who else? The AMA. They've all called them out. This is a protocol that anti-abortion activists are promoting that has not been through medical trials. They had to end medical trials because it was harming people. They're promoting a lot of dangerous information, and they're promoting abortion stigma and shame, right? And
Kate, can I just interrupt?
Yeah.
One of the things that really has hit home as I talk to people about this particular piece is that they tell people that abortion increases your risk of breast cancer, actually causes breast cancer. And also they tell people that if you have an abortion, you're likely to not be able to have pregnancy later.
Yeah.
Both of those big issues for young women, and of course, both complete lies.
Yes. And we know too that the shame that comes because there's a very narrow conservative Christian agenda that's being promoted through these places, the kind of shaming they give people about abortion also has mental health effects. And I know this because when I was 20 years old, I thought I was taking my sister to get options counseling at a real clinic. And it turned out to be a CareNet, which is like one of the McDonald's franchises of anti-abortion centers. And the result of that visit, not only did they physically try to block us from leaving, which was terrifying, but they printed out a picture of an ultrasound where they had printed a speech bubble where the fetus was saying, "Hi, mommy," and they put it in a pink baby book and they handed it to someone who wasn't sure she wanted to continue her pregnancy. And I will tell you that for a decade after, my sister ended up having an abortion, and for a decade after had that ultrasound with her and was tortured by the things those people had said. So these people are dangerous. In addition to that, you probably know in a lot of states, they get federal and state monies, millions and millions of dollars, hundreds and hundreds of millions, actually. So they're taking money from programs like temporary assistance for needy families, and it's being funneled into places that have this political agenda. So they're awful on a lot of fronts. If we think of clinics as being very important grassroots points of entry for people to get care, we have to think of anti-abortion centers as the anti-equivalent of that. They're on the ground, they're in communities, and they're lying about what they do. So we take them on in a whole bunch of ways. If you have any interest in doing some things about the ones in your area, we are happy to work with you. Part of what we do is resource folks wherever they are. We can do the research on who the legitimate providers are, who the clinics are. We can send you research specific to your state about some of the stats. We work with an opposition research organization called Equity Forward that does that research as like a watchdog sort of organization. So that's the Roe campaign. We have seen people come into that and be really just agitated and infuriated about the lies we can be told. It's bad enough we can't get really great sex ed in this country in public schools, but then totally unregulated, unlicensed organizations are allowed to spread lies about sexual and reproductive health, right? And that's just, it's infuriating, where we live in a world where a lot of people are grown women and don't even know their own anatomy, right? We're just piling more lies on top of that. I'm looking in the chat. Yes, lies, lies, more lies. We need sex ed in schools. This is all true. So that's why we take them on. And when we started taking them on, some people said they didn't understand why. But I think now in the post-obs era, more and more people are beginning to understand the proliferation of these places is a big prong of the anti-abortion and the far rights movement. There's a picture from one of our teach-ins with a student reproductive rights group. And so it's just an example of how we're going in with our activists and working with younger people and empowering them to take action where they live and on their campuses and in their communities. And the other program that's really important and has driven a lot of what we do is our storytelling program. So right as the Dobbs decision draft was being leaked in 2022, we were starting to train our first cohort of elder abortion storytellers. We have always been really focused on storytelling as a very important part of what we do. It kind of comes naturally, I think, to older women. And we wanted to grow it as a way to reach young people. And particularly now we're finding, since we lost the federal protections that Roe v. Wade offered, you know, there are so many parallels between what people experience pre-Roe and what post-Dobbs young people are having to do to get abortions. Once again, the people who have the means and the wherewithal to find a way to get to a different state are doing so. And those tend to be people with the most privilege and the most access to information. And other people are being left behind, right? More people are having children they did not plan to have. We know now the rate, you know, Texas has the largest number of children born following a rape since Dobbs was decided. So in this moment of despair, it's very, very powerful to not just document, capture these stories, archive them, but to bring them into conversations with intergenerational groups of activists to say, okay, the common thread here is misogyny, racism, classism. The common thread is trying to criminalize a basic biological function. And what happens is we die, we lose, right? Our lives are taken from us, whether that's literally or it reshapes the path of someone's life permanently. And young people are so energized by hearing these powerful stories, right? And so we started building teach-ins around those. We have worked with storytellers to talk to reporters, making sure that older women's voices are part of this, the national conversation, to say it's not just young people who care about abortion rights, it's everyone. And older women are committed voters and they care about this, and we're not going to shut up, and we're going to work together, which everybody's always talking about these big generational divides and how nobody can get along, the boomers and the whoever else. And GRR is saying, no, actually, we do know how to collaborate. We know that we're stronger together. We want to learn from our elders and from young people in a bi-directional relationship. And we think when we come together, we're pretty unstoppable. So we have an archive, a digital archive that you can visit on our website. And there are animated stories, video recorded stories, written stories. People write, you know, send submissions anonymously. people share all of their information. It's really anyone's choice. We're always looking to grow that archive. I have to say, doing this work of storytelling, again, a thing a lot of people might say, why storytelling? The world's on fire. Like, why storytelling? And, you know, I think that's actually when we need it the most. I will say, like, I'm going to be 38 years old in a month. And I feel a lot less despair working with older women than a lot of my peers who are only working with people their own age. There's still despair, right? We feel it, but working intergenerationally reminds us we don't have to finish the work in our lifetime. We have to pass it on. And also that we inherit from the people before us, right? And so I think young people really want that right now. They want to know, okay, there's these women who are still here, still in this fight, and they live through some really rough stuff. And they have something to offer this to us in this moment. And these are older women who are open to listening to younger people who say, our demands need to be different in this moment, right? Roe is not enough. It was never enough. It was never what the movements were asking for. And I think it's also a great experience to see women in their late 70s who had never spoken about these experiences before, sharing them for the first time, being able to let go of their own shame and stigma that was put on them, and to say, this is what I have to offer, and have it be valued. And to say, we're not just storing these in a library somewhere, we're using them as political education tools to have a conversation about what can we learn from the past and what do we need to do going forward. And so those two programs really drive a lot of our work. And in addition, we work on legislation, like Connie said. A lot of our state legislative work is here in Maine, but we've been a part of the Kansans for Constitutional Freedom campaign that was 2 summers ago to protect their abortion rights on a ballot measure. We're working with folks in Arkansas on their attempt to get it on the ballot. They're now having to sue their state Secretary of State in their state Supreme Court to get him to count the signatures. But those are the kinds of efforts that we take on. And so, I mean, I think GRR is a really terribly special place to be. And we do work to try to make it low barrier so people give the time and participate in the ways that feel right to them. And also that people can, we really like to work with groups like yours. You're already a group, you're already doing things and coming together. How can we resource you around this and partner? And it's not really, I don't know, it feels very different than any other type of organizing I've ever done. And we have a lot of fun. I'm going to stop there because I want to hear questions or thoughts from you all. And I would love to learn more about like what you're up to in your community already. Yeah, Paula.
So in working with like Arkansas, do you have a legal team that works with you know, getting the Secretary of State or whoever to count the signatures?
So we're so the campaign running that amendment process is called Arkansans for Limited Government. And we're an organizational member of their ballot question committee, but they do have legal advice, and they have lawyers, and the campaign as a whole does. And so they are taking on their Secretary of State. It's at their Supreme Court. We think we'll have a decision soon. I was just talking with our board member who's a major driver in that campaign this morning, and she says she thinks by the very beginning of August we should have a result. You know, so we really try to throw whatever efforts we can behind that campaign without, you know, taking it over. It's their campaign, but we're happy to be a part of it and to also talk about it with folks, particularly living in high access states. like California. Because we live in Maine, Connie and I, and we're also a high access state. And if we don't talk to people who are living in Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma, we'll forget, you know, how bad and hard things really are. And so this issue in Arkansas, while this amendment would amend their constitution to give the right to an abortion up to 18 weeks, which is not ideal, of course. Like, we want so much more than that. And our decision to support this was really like, there is nothing in that region. You know, it's really Kansas that's holding down that whole region. And if Arkansas could have clinics operating again, it would make an enormous difference for Oklahoma, Texas, Louisiana, Florida even. And so, yeah, I can put a link to their campaign in the chat if you want to follow and learn more about that. There are several states, of course, that are going to have ballot initiatives hopefully this fall. Any other questions or comments? I see Karen.
Karen and Amy have their hand raised.
Karen.
Yeah, I was curious, excuse me, I was curious, where does the morning after pill stand in the states where Obama made available the morning after pill for girls and women?
I mean, as far as I know, the morning after pill hasn't been made illegal anywhere. Emergency contraception hasn't been made illegal anywhere. However, of course, one of the big barriers about that medication is that pharmacists in lots of places have refused to fill those prescriptions and have given people a hard time. Here in Maine, even though it's completely legal and available, emergency contraception can be a tough thing if you live in a really small town where everybody knows each other, including like the pharmacist knows your mom and your 16-year-old who needs Plan B. So I think we're still dealing with some of the culture change issues around emergency contraception. But it hasn't been outlawed anywhere. I mean, of course they want to come for this, right? Like,
Right. It's on the list of
all
things they want
forms of birth control.
right. And because they keep calling it an abortion pill, but which it is not.
Because
It is not, it's not the same thing. It's not even close to the same thing. But of course they keep calling it that. There are some college campuses that are working to have Plan B available in vending machines on campus, which is great, but at this point still very expensive. So, and of course, if it's in a vending machine, you can't use your health insurance to pay for it. So there are problems with cost, and certainly it needs to be a lot more available than it is. But working with colleges to make sure they have it in their health centers that's an important thing to do, and have it available at all times for everybody who needs it. That brings up another issue with these fake abortion clinics, or fake clinics, as well. One of the things is that since they are not a medical facility, they're not, they have no HIPAA rules. And so they do not have to maintain privacy at all. So it's a big deal in small communities, in rural communities like where I live, but even in larger communities, if they can go and tell your parents that you're pregnant, that really changes the scene. And they can do that because they're not in any way confined. They're not compelled, excuse me, to keep silent or to keep your confidentiality at all. Right. So young women go in, and then, not only do they try and manipulate them while they're there, but they may well contact somebody else who knows them.
Yeah, there have been reports of these anti-abortion centers, they will say that they follow HIPAA, but they're unregulated. So there's no way to check if that's happening or not. And they're not required to. So it's just like, we pinky promise your information's safe. But there have been actual, investigative reporting showing that they shared information with other parties. And in this day and age where, Texas passes SB 8 and people are being threatened with criminal charges for helping people get abortions, even that kind of, oh, you went to an anti-abortion center and then you managed to find your way to an actual abortion fund and who would help you get out of state. But now this place has shared somewhere that you came seeking that and you were thinking about an abortion. It's just the era of surveillance that we're in and the digital footprint that is left behind. It's no longer like a payphone. And, it's actually much harder to hide the kinds of activity that, for example, you think of the Jane Collective in Chicago performing secret abortions for 11,000 people. Sure, they got raided once, but actually they did a lot of good without being caught. And that's not really how things work anymore, right? So we're lucky in this day and age, we have the abortion pills, but we also have a surveillance state that is much stronger than it used to be, right? So they pose a number of public health threats. And just about the emergency contraceptive stuff, Karen, I just want to say, I think it's a confluence of factors, right? The internet does make some information more accessible about sexual and reproductive health, and even just sharing information about what to do if you're afraid you might be pregnant. There is some sex ed that is better than it used to be. And certainly emergency contraception is really a lovely thing to have, and it's still too expensive, right? But I did drop in the chat a link to a group called EC for EC. It's Emergency Contraception for Every Campus. And they work really hard to make sure that college students know about emergency contraception, how to use it and where they can get it, and to make it available in health centers and vending machines and things like that. So if that's of interest, I wanted to drop that there. Any other thoughts or questions? Julia?
In 1966, I was 16, living with my sister alone while my mom was at a hippie commune, and I found out I was pregnant. And the despair, wow, it was just terrible. Lucky someone at my high school handed me a flyer that had explicit instructions on who to contact, where to go in Tijuana. I mean, they had a list of the good doctors and the bad doctors. And it was such a relief. It was such a relief. And so we did go to Tijuana. We had to borrow some money, and it was just at a doctor's house, but she was very, very, very good, and all her help was good. And they tried to support you emotionally too. And so most important, what I think of is passing out good instructions, letting everybody have the instructions, where to go, what to do. When all else fails, you just got to do what you need to do. And you got to have a good way to do it. So, I don't know. I was just really lucky in 66 to have someone just in my high school hand me a flyer right at the right time, and everything worked out good. So
I'm so glad.
yeah.
Great, and thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And that makes me think about, again, the education, like arming ourselves and then being able to teach other people and disseminating accurate information, building up that knowledge is so essential. And so, part of what GRR has done, we have spent a lot of time in this organization trying to educate and arm people with the information about where do you find who are vetted clinics, what are the resources for funding, for practical support, all the things, but also information about abortion pills and self-managed abortion. We're a part of a national campaign called Abortion on Our Own Terms. And that is all about sharing information about abortion pills and how to get them, how to safely manage one's abortion, when to know, when to go to an emergency room, how to recognize things like infection, hemorrhaging, etc. And I think sometimes, you know, people really focus on policy change, and it's like, yes, we need it. And people need abortions today. And any, you know, being a person in one's community who says, I know how to help, is so valuable. I mean, it's life-saving, right? And just this weekend, I had a friend whose very close friend had an abortion, and she was looking for, just like looking online for like resources post-abortion for just emotions, right? Like she's having a lot of emotions. And she sent a link to a place to my friend and said, can you ask your friend Cait if this is a real place or not? Is it legit? And immediately I looked at the name of it and I said, I bet you that's an anti-abortion center. Plugged it in Google and it sure was, right? And so then I was able to give her a whole list of resources for post-abortion counseling, all sorts of things that were from legitimate places. And so I'm like the abortion lady around my friends, right? I went on some dates with someone and then they ghosted me. They like just stopped calling. And 6 months later, they hit me up because they said, do you have any abortion pills for a friend of mine? You know, like that kind of thing, you know, just knowing no matter what, you're the person who knows stuff. And if you don't know the answer, you know someone who does. And so I think that's one of the things we're trying to build with older women as well, is say you can be a resource for younger people in your community. You can, how do you let people know I'm a safe person to come to and I'm an informed person? And if I don't know the answer for you, I can find it through my network, right? Because that's
and young people are both astonished that grandmothers have even thought about sex, you know, so that's like, so that's always fun. That's a real fun part of it. But also trust our voices. I mean, you know, we don't have any skin in that game in terms of, you know, it's different. We are older and are seen as more trustworthy. It is so fun talking to college and high school students because, of course, they're shocked that, you know, we know the word vagina, but then they also it's safer. It's safer than talking to their parents, and it's great to be a resource like that.
Yeah. And I mean, Julia, the story you shared, you know, that being able to, even for young people to be able to hear, oh, you still remember what it was like to be so young and so afraid. It matters so much for young people. It's so destigmatizing for younger people to hear older women say, I know that exact feeling of dread and that exact feeling of relief when you get the care you need, right? And I just can't stress enough how radical that feels to me, to have women of very different generations come together and use their own lives as the stuff of political education and action, right? Because I think like my profound belief is ordinary women make the world go round, right? And so I really want us not just telling our stories, but looking at them and saying, what does this tell us about how power moves and about how we can resist it? So that flyer from a high school student, that kind of, you know, that's power, right? And so I think it's, you know, storytelling is so much deeper than the words, right? It really is, it removes weight from people to say, oh, you accept me, you understand. I'm not the first person ever to feel this. I'm not alone. Those things really matter. Paula. Oh.
So how about grandmothers for reproductive rights who also share information about birth control and avoiding, you know, the pregnancy in the first place? sometimes it's difficult to go to one's parent for whatever reason. And my personal experience, when my daughters were teenagers, I worked at Planned Parenthood. Well, that opened up a lot of conversations, and they will tell you they were scarred for life by some of those conversations. But nevertheless, when they went away to school, they knew they could come to me, and they said it was the era of sponges. Do you remember birth control being sponges? Okay. And I would send cases of sponges to this school where they were at, because it was kind of rural. They didn't have access to cars. They couldn't really go to their teachers. And this was a high school, and at graduation, the headmaster came to me and said, "I know what you've done for the upper dorm. Thank you."
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, I mean, yes, birth control is totally in the world of what we care about. We're part of the Free the Pill coalition that had been working to get Opill on pharmacy shelves. We've done some legislative work to remove barriers to birth control methods. We work with family planning providers who are also abortion providers. Birth control is definitely one of the things that the opposition is planning to come for, right? And for us, it's all about autonomy, right? And that's about being able to not just choose a birth control method, but having all of those different methods available, accessible, affordable, and no method is 100% foolproof. And abortions are essential, and they're essential birth control. They literally prevent birth, right? So, I think our focus, we're very abortion forward, but we're really interested in talking about all of these issues, right, together. And I think we're nimble and flexible enough that when we interact with folks who are like, "I'm really passionate about X," I'm like, "Great, let's build something around that, and we'll resource you to do that," right? And so, I think in thinking about, I don't know from this conversation what you all imagine might, if you want to do some things with us, and I think, let it simmer, but we really are interested in partnering and resourcing folks so that you can do what you do best in your community that you know best. Right. But all of those conversations about birth control, abortion, sex, all of it, there is something really great and disarming about grandmothers showing up to a state house or to a college and saying, "We're here to talk to you about sex." It does have this effect where I would say legislators don't always know what to do. Because we're also very unapologetic, right? And very knowledgeable. We're informed. And so we show up in an informed way to say, yeah, we're here for future generations and for people's younger selves, right? I think there's something healing about being able to speak openly about something that was so silenced for so many years, right?
And I would just add it in our mission statement, which we didn't read to you, but basically that our mission is, it's not just abortion. Our mission is to make sure that people can choose to have families or not have families, and to raise those families in a safe environment. And that really includes all of this work.
Mm-hmm.
In Maine, we've had a very interesting few decades, but when I first moved to Maine in the 90s, or moved back to Maine in the 90s, we had the second highest teen pregnancy rate in the country. And I was delivering in residency. Before that, I was delivering 13-year-olds, little kids clutching their teddy bears. And what changed was a lot of energy went into sex education. And once that, and into telling young people that it was okay to say no. And those combinations of things made a huge difference. And availability of contraception and family planning places that were not required to tell parents. And I mean, there's a whole host of things that goes into making sex safer for kids and decreasing teen pregnancy rates. And all of that's important, absolutely. And right now, unfortunately, all of that is threatened because there's so many forms of birth control that are excluded in the Project 2025 that everybody's talking about. You know, they will eliminate much of the long-acting contraception, which is what has been so powerful in terms of preventing pregnancy for young people and older people.
In 1971, I was the person in high school that you went to find out which local GYNs were willing to prescribe birth control for underage women without telling their parents. And so I absolutely agree about the importance of people in the communities with the resources. And then in 1973, I was an outside campus agitator, as they called us, but I traveled around the country for 6 months on the Greyhound bus, mostly from university, helping people do things. And I visited the Boston Women's Health Collective, who had just put out Our Bodies, Ourselves in 1971. And so when I actually went to university at the end of 1973 in Florida, I helped found the Women's Health Collective in Tallahassee and worked with women's health and tracking your temperature and doing menstrual extraction. We had a group of women who got together and did menstrual extraction together so that, you know, they never knew if they were pregnant, but it didn't matter because out it went. And so I was involved in this during my fertile years, and I'm absolutely, as a grandmother, as a raging granny, happy to continue to educate and rage on this topic. And I was am an organizer, I suppose, for the Poor People's Campaign. And so I was in DC when Roe was overturned. And so I went to the Supreme Court that day with all the other people and demonstrated against it. And so I guess those are just some of the things that I wanted to add to the conversation, that yes, this is important. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Rowan. And you know, that just to say also that while our sort of storytelling archive really started with a focus on abortion, we've really have been wanting to expand it. And so we've gotten some stories from people. We know a lot of people ended up, you know, having pregnancies they were forced to keep and then placing children for adoption. There were unwed mother homes, but also there are so many powerful stories of how people have been involved in reproductive rights work. And so I would just say, like, for people to consider, if you are interested in submitting something to our archive, we would work with you on it, but it would be really wonderful to have that kind of work captured, as well as your story, Julia. If you're interested, we can talk about that another time if you'd like. But it's just making me think, like, these stories are so important, not just about abortion, but about all of these reproductive issues. Yeah. Julia, what did you want to share?
Okay, I'm not religious. I've never been religious. But when I was in trouble, I prayed and cried and prayed and cried, please show me a way to get out of this. And it was just right after that that someone handed me the flyer. And so
God's a feminist. What do you know? I think the universe is a feminist.
yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, it really shows us too the power of information and women's networks of sharing that information. It's really how women have survived everything, right? There's this phrase about gossip saves lives, right? That is popular in Spanish speaking countries. And it's about, domestic violence and abortion and birth control and all the things, pleasure. It feels like all of that has traveled through these informal networks. And as we gained more legal rights and more infrastructure, some of that maybe faded, right? But we're seeing a resurgence of the need for those kind of networks in a moment where that legal infrastructure is crumbling and failing us, right? And so I think those stories are really important for young people to hear, also to know you're not helpless even when the law is brutal and wrong, right? We can still build power, we can still find ways, because women have always found ways, right? We've lived under misogyny since the beginning of whenever. So, we're smart, we're capable, and we're more smart and more capable when we share this across generation. It's just like, it's incredibly exciting and wonderful to hear your stories. It really energizes me. So thank you. Yeah, Paula.
So I'm aware that most of us on this screen are probably have some privilege and some education, and not everyone has access to this kind of thing. How do you broaden the access of the work you're doing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think part of that is through partnerships with organizations led by different kinds of folks, right? GRR really, started with a lot of white, educated, older women of privilege, right? And so as we're growing and I think deepening our roots, that question is always in front of us. I feel like, how do we come out of that origin point of privilege and get deeper into where it's needed most, right? And I do think that partnerships with clinics, abortion clinics, local providers, and the work around anti-abortion centers, because they are both, those family planning clinics are serving vulnerable people. Those anti-abortion centers are targeting those people. When we get out in front of those and we put ourselves in the mix, and when we're on the street in front of those places, we meet the people we would not otherwise meet, right? We engage and make that information as easily shareable as possible. So I think that's part of it. And also, it's always the work of growing trust with communities of color, communities that are working class and low income, right? Like it's a process of growing trust and saying, we're not here to like tell you what to do, right? We're here to provide whatever support and resource we can around this. But that's something that we're also, I think, really hoping our new executive director is going to be someone who comes in with a lot of connections to different communities than the ones we've reached so far.
Other bits that we're doing is this summer, Cait is going to be doing work with school nurses in the state. And obviously, so that's high school kids all over the state from all kinds of different places, and getting good information to school nurses can be huge. And I love to highlight this one program that Cait did years ago with Maine Family Planning, which was to have some interns in one of our towns has a large Somali community, to have as interns Somali teenagers who could go and talk to their peers, their friends, about what their questions were about sex. So there's all kinds of ways to do outreach to empower folks from all kinds of communities to be able to talk about sex, about birth control, about abortion, about all of the issues that mean so much to all of us, that mean our freedom, that allow us to have our own lives.
I had completely forgotten about the school nurses. I forgot, it just like went out of my head. But yeah, we're really excited because actually 2 former school nurses who are GRRs came to us with this idea saying, you know, we're still part of these, there's national associations and state-based associations for school nurses, and they are a critical health resource for children of all incomes and backgrounds. And for many kids, that's the only healthcare they're going to get in a lot of ways, right? And so we're working, we're piloting this program in Maine, but we're also working with a former school nurse down in New Mexico, and we're trying to bring this to their national group and to bring together school nurses from across the country to talk about what are the challenges when you're in a politically hostile state. What are the challenges in working with minors around these issues, and how can we get creative? How can we make sure that school nurses are as resourced as they can be to give young people the best warm handoff, right, when they're in a tough spot? And so we're in the beginnings of that, you know, network building, and really excited about it. And the response so far from school nurses has been really positive. So we're really excited. But yeah, we're always looking for different ways, like who's already a trusted person, right, in whatever community, and then go to them and build a relationship that way that then has ripple effects, right? But yeah, I'm really excited about the school nurses. We're doing a lot of stuff. I forgot to mention it. But yeah, that's such an important point. It really is.
That's why you brought me, right?
Yeah. Yeah, not just for the street cred of being an older GER. Yeah. Right. We have to give them the fight of the century. I really feel, you know, like they have plans for us, but we have plans for ourselves, and we really believe in them. And so yeah, I'm really grateful that we got to spend time with y'all today, and I really appreciate you meeting at a different time, so we weren't up at 11 p.m. over here. Since we're transitioning into announcements, I just wanted to say that we have a webinar coming up. It's a deep dive into looking behind the curtain of who are these big anti-abortion organizations funding anti-abortion centers. We're working with our research partner, Equity Forward. They're going to present some of their opposition research. So that is in September on the 11th. We are going to record it, but if you want to be there live, please invite people, and we'll make it available after. But that's a sort of deeper dive into the anti-abortion center work. I will follow up by sending an email to y'all with some other things. But yeah, thank you truly for having both of us. It was really lovely to meet you all.
Really, thank you. It's been big fun to meet you and to share.
Okay, so you know how this goes. You give a big Zoom applause, however that looks. Yay, thank you. We're learning how to do this after many years. Thank you, Connie and Cait, for a very rich and informative program. And I learned a lot. I think probably everybody on the call learned a lot. And it's nice to connect across the continent.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It is.
Very,
Yeah.
very nice. So thanks to Rowan for putting us in contact.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, and it's great to know y'all are out here doing your thing.
Absolutely.
And we're excited to collaborate. So thank you. Have a good rest of your evenings.
Well,
Yes, have
don't
a
go
good night.
away
Because
because
we want to sing. Yes.
yes,
We're the raging grannies, and we're here to take a stand to keep choice free for women all across our mighty land. We won't go back to hangers if our right to choose is banned. We're rising up today. No more rape and no more beatings. Women rise, we're tired of pleading. We're rising up to tell you that our bodies are our own. We're rising up today. We're here in San Jose and wonder at the sad disgrace that women's rights must simply disappear without a trace. We dance and sing and shout out loud to save the human race. We're rising up today. No more rape and no more beatings. Women rise, we're tired of pleading. We're rising up to tell you that our bodies are our own. We're rising up today. What makes you think that you can take your liberties with us? We're mothers, sisters, aunts, and daughters kicking up a fuss. Your violations end today, there's no more to discuss. We're rising up today. No more rape and no more beatings. Women rise, we're tired of pleading. We're rising up to tell you that our bodies are our own. We're rising up today. We dance today for justice, and it's not just for the sport. We own our bodies, we'll protect the rights for which we fought. The right to step up unafraid, the freedom to abort. We're rising up today. No more rape and no more beatings. Women rise, we're tired of pleading. We're rising up to tell you that our bodies are our own. We're rising up today.
When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war, when women all cast off their chains, when women all cast off their chains, how I want to be in that number. When women all cast off their chains, when women's bodies are our own, when women's bodies are our own, how I want to be in that number. When women's bodies are their own, when everyone has equal rights, when everyone has equal rights, how I want to be in that number. When everyone has equal rights, when we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war.
Thank you for the work you're doing, Connie and Cait.
And you.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the songs.
Exactly.
Our songbook, the Raging Granny songbook is raginggrannies.net. Information about Raging Grannies is raginggrannies.org, but the songbook is at raginggrannies.net, and it doesn't have everything that we sing because none of us has managed to get privileges to upload songs, but it has hundreds of songs on all kinds of topics, and they're, like you heard tonight, they're topical songs to familiar tunes.
Great.
That's wonderful. Thank
Oh,
you
we're-
all.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank
Have a
you,
lovely evening. Talk
Yes,
soon.
everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for all your work.
Great seeing everyone.